But here we find King Solomon, who writes in the book of Proverbs, he who has found a woman has found a good thing. He who has found a wife finds good. So I want to bring out something that just really blessed me in the writings of Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg, writing of the mystery of marriage. He says that it was customary in ancient Israel to ask the newlywed groom, have you found or do you find? And this is an allusion to two verses juxtaposed written by King Solomon. In Mishli, he says, he who has found a wife finds good. And he also writes, and I find woman bitterer than death. So we would at first see kind of this contradiction and these two opposing views of women, even conflicting views of women. But the discrepancy reveals the instruction, the Torah of his mother that has instructed him away from the strange woman to understand the righteousness of the noble spouse, and the idea of selflessness as the key to finding and relating to one's wife at the level of their common soul root. So going back to that idea of the soulmate that is found through meritorious actions, whereas a man would bind himself to a wicked woman because of his ego, because of his arrogance, because of vanity and narcissism, and thus be drawn to a woman that would lead him into literal avodah zarah, idolatry. So the woman who is found to be bitterer than death is the negative relationship that comes about through him projecting his ego onto the woman and relating to her from a place of selfishness rather than selflessness. So King Solomon calls the positive relationship between husband and wife good, and the flight from a negative relationship being good. As the verses read, he who has found a woman has found good and will elicit favor or goodwill from Hashem. So that good is the good of that woman and the union with that good woman. However, with the evil woman, the wicked wife, the woman is bitterer than death, for her heart is snares and nets, and her hands are fetters. He who is good before Hashem will flee from her, but he who sins shall be caught by her. So one who achieves good by cleaving to the good wife, who herself represents the Shekinah, the presence, the revelation of the goodness of Torah itself and the goodness of Hashem through her embodiment, that would humble him to a space of selflessness that nullifies the ego and obliterates that arrogance that would, again, cause him to be that Lemuel, what, is there no God? Be in that state of mind. But one who flees from the wicked woman is actually nullifying and annihilating the image of his ego. I'm going to read just very quickly from Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg's Mystery of Marriage. In contrast to the verse, he who has found a woman appears without the definite article. This implies that one who finds his true soulmate names her after or recognizes their common source, as happened in the story of creation. And therefore, he who has found a woman has found good. Viewing one's spouse as part of oneself can be the sign of an exaggerated ego. One seeing your spouse as merely an appendage of himself and thus feeling no need to relate to her as a distinct individual. And this is what is alluded to in I find the woman bitterer than death, in which the egocentric husband sees only himself in his wife, and indeed that part of himself that he would despise, as one's spouse in any orientation reflects aspects of the self. One's true individuality originates in one's soul root. It is the way of man to search for woman. Why? Because as in the garden, the woman was taken from the side of man. It was the part of himself that would seem lost to him, the part that was separated from him, for him to then seek to reunify, to become whole again, just as we constantly, perpetually seek Hashem and becoming whole again through unifying with him and unifying him and his Shekhinah through ourselves as vessels in the earth. And so the lost side of a woman is the unconscious level of his own soul that he must constantly seek to reunify, and through that reunification rectify, which brings us back to the idea of tikkun. And so the righteous wife is as that Ezer Kenegdo, the one whose very presence in finding her would correct the man, challenge him to elevate to that state of wholeness that comes about through transforming himself in the crucible that is the womb of woman, the womb wisdom of woman, and the idea that the woman is the channel of Hashem's attributes in the spirit, and thus the woman becomes even as a god to the man, not to be worshipped as an idol, as in the example of the idolatrous wife, the strange woman who would seduce a man to overcome him, mostly sexually, into deviance and immorality, and then make herself an idol as an extension of his idolatry of himself. But in the righteous juxtaposition of that, the polarization of that is the righteous wife who becomes as God to him in imparting wisdom to him and challenging him to be his best self and embody the attributes of Hashem. So I appreciate you letting me share that. I didn't intend to speak on that, but just throughout the discussion, I remembered that passage that I had read and wanted to bring some of that out as far as, even King Sarah as Abraham's soulmate and his helpmeet, his Ezer Kenegdo.
No, I thank you for that. As I glean from that as well, when you mentioned earlier that when a human being is born, when a man is born, when a woman is born, then we're not born separate. We're born with our equal opposite, our mate, our soulmate. I would imagine that an interesting conversation or thought comes to mind when people are listening to that, so as to say, so does that mean that my soulmate is someone that shares my birthday? No. So I want to expand a little bit on what you said, and of course, if you want to come back and expand on what you said a little bit more, you can feel free so too. So I'm familiar with the idea of what a soulmate is, and the idea that we are not born as half, we are born wholly, meaning we are born with our complete opposites. So that means that when you are born, your soulmate is there. That does not mean that your soulmate shares the exact same birthday as you, because the soul is aloof and beyond time itself. So your soulmate can be a little earlier or older than you. Your soulmate can be a little younger or younger than you, right? Because there's no concept of time when it comes to the soul. Concept of time applies to the body, not the soul. So your soulmate doesn't have to be someone born in the same hour, second, minute, and day as you, and year as you, right? Because again, when it comes to the soul, there is no time. So I just wanted to say that towards that point, right? I also wanted to say that in considering the idea of a twin soul and a soulmate, I would want to say that this is certainly a subject matter that is dear to me, for more reasons than one. You could imagine that many of people journey and go through life with problems and challenges and difficulties. And a huge part of excelling in life is having problems, trials, adversities. It's a huge part of your journey in life. But those trials, those adversities, and those difficulties can be made to be easier if we are to find, locate, and listen carefully, accept our soulmate when he or she appears. It is inevitable that a person will cross paths with who and what can be construed as your soulmate. You absolutely, the universe wills that you will cross paths with your soulmate. And in fact, this is such a powerful conversation that I'm more than likely going to come back this week just to touch on the idea of soulmates from a biblical perspective, and then develop it more from external literature and kind of stay there as well. But the universe wills that we meet up with our soulmate. So it's inevitable that you will cross paths with your soulmate. The real question is, will you accept your soulmate in that time, in that crossing? And one thing is for sure about life: crossing paths with someone, it can be, something that happens transitory, or it can be something that is continuous. For most people, when they cross paths with their soulmate, for some very um, poor reasons, we may not either be ready, we may not be in full understanding that this person is here to help us in our journey to get to the next level. So many of people actually lose out on that opportunity. And I want to say that if you are a person that you have crossed paths with your soulmate, it's immediately inevitable that it's not inevitable, but it's immediately noticeable that this person is your soulmate. Um, this conversation deserves so much time that it's inconceivable for me to try to synthesize it in the next 5 minutes that we have to close out this live stream. So I guess for me, this will be a teaser for next week. So close us out, Nasika Hawa, on your thoughts on a soulmate and however you would choose to end the live.
Yes, this is definitely a lofty concept that deserves its own extensive uh, explanation through, of course, Torah, the extra canonical sources, and even unveiling the Kabbalistic significance of, or the Kabbalistic understanding of the soulmate. For the sake of time, I couldn't get to that part of my notes, but that bridge between Abraham and Sarah as a certain level of a depiction of the soulmate relationship, the soulmate dynamic, and then directly descended from that, Yitzhak and Rebecca as what is considered by many the perfect model of marriage, and indeed the perfect exemplification of soulmates, and even love at first sight, and not as this frivolous kind of Hollywood understanding of love at first sight, but love as, again, the unification of Hashem and his Shekinah. That divine union and unity, as Ahava is linked to Echad etymologically, but recognizing that's the true love, recognizing that unification of Hashem and his Shekinah, the divine attributes of Hashem reflected in one's counterpart, in one's soulmate, and the desire to reunify with that reflection of righteousness within that soulmate, and that righteousness, those holy sparks that are recognized between one another, being the foundation of true attraction. And even controversially, the idea of soulmates, could even be evident in uh, the very controversial interpretations of the captive wife, the captive woman who was made a wife, the drawing out of the holy sparks, the recognition not only of physical beauty and the acquisition of that woman, not only um, catalyzed by mere lust, but the recognition of righteousness within her and the desire to draw that out literally through that covenant. So that's definitely something that can be explored. And the idea of a soulmate being that union of Hashem and the Shekinah dwelling within them, as they both embody Torah, and as it is said, where two or more are gathered, where two are gathered, even in the study of Torah, in the love of Torah, in the love of wisdom. So if you imagine, two soulmates who join together out of a shared love of wisdom, a shared love of Torah, and themselves embodying Torah, and then being that unification of Hashem through their union, that is the true soulmate, even correcting one another as complements, as we constantly, allude to the idea of iron sharpening iron. Where else would that be most clearly done than in a marriage between soulmates? Two who would challenge each other, and even through that impassioned and passionate friction, being able to sharpen one another in discernment, in wisdom, even in the prophetic estate. But yeah, so maybe that could be a different discussion at a different time.
Absolutely, it's going to be a powerful discussion. I think that's a discussion that is a rarity to find from Israelite platforms, and as we've been doing for the longest, we're going to spearhead the way and having that dialogue and bringing it to the greater public, to the community, so that everybody can be